Hello world of YouTube and welcome to the listening log update for December of 2023 to break up this year's list week because I knew I had a lot to talk about and I needed a little more time to actually pull the video together. I've got 17 albums that I spun to close out 2023. A lot of catch-up, a couple of December releases, and oddly enough, a weird theme sprinkled throughout a lot of the records to unify it all together. There's time codes in the description because you know this one's going to be a little bit longer than some of the ones that I've dropped throughout the last year. Thank you for joining me throughout the 2023 season. Let's round it out with, honestly, a lot of hip-hop, starting with...
Make his head swing across the floor like it stomped the yard. Remember, I was on that light, now I'm sipping dark.
I started December actually with a record that I've kind of been holding on to from the end of November, but was getting a drop in December because the artist sent me the album prior to its release. And it's actually an instance where I got to watch an album sort of get pulled together from the background in pieces, because Purp is a buddy of mine, Juan, and Roadrunner is his, like, first professionally produced, you know, bigger sounding project than the mixtapes he had been dropping prior. It's seeing him trying to sort of evolve his songwriting as well to transcend just the gangster life that he's been living and sort of talking about those times, which does crop up still on here a lot, like on Rich Off Grass or on Nightmare on Draper, where he definitely does a good job at painting a picture with some good bars. He gives you his slice of life in a way that, again, especially because I know the guy, it definitely feels like very much Juan. A lot of the punchlines and bars that he spins have a good wit to him, and he's good at gracing a mic. He's got good flow, and he's good at picking beats to sort of match the energy he's really trying to present to the track, and I think that attempt at a fuller portrayal of himself also sort of does this project favors, because one of the biggest knocks I can give this project is something that I've told him as well prior to this, is that I like a lot of what's going on here, but I think he's got to work on his hook spinning a little bit to sort of give these tracks, or at least multiple tracks across the track listing, a bit more of something to grab onto. Because I enjoy the flip on Nightmare on Draper into Nicki Yolik, especially the wordplay on Nicki Yolik, but I feel like because it's just a lot of verse across these two tracks in particular, they feel like they're needing something to sort of hook the listener in, and it's when Rich Off Grass comes in and it's got a semblance of a hook, you know, for as small as it is, to sort of break up the pacing of the record and give the verses a little more of a chance to stand out on their own. One of my favorite tracks on here, as far as like spinning a hook and adapting from his own roots, is Sunroof. I think that the hook of that song is actually really strong, and I think that as far as like dissecting into more of like an intimate style song with that type of instrumental, it's definitely something that I could see myself spinning once the weather starts to warm up a little bit, and I could see it being like a bigger song for Juan. And actually another example of like where I feel like a hook could help sort of give a song a little more dynamics, Jersey Shore after that. Given it feels like it's trying to sort of branch out from some of the intimacy on Sunroof, it feels like it needs a little something between the verses to give it a little more staying power, you know what I mean? Hell, I'd even argue that like the melodic flows on tracks like If You Try and on Same Bros do a lot to just sort of break up some of the pacing a little bit too, as far as the track-to-track basis is considered. But I enjoy this. I think this is a solid first step forward as far as, like, again, wordplay, flow, you know, painting a picture. Juan's got a lot of good foundations here that he could definitely build upon into more, with more experimentation and growth. I'm giving this a 6. This is really strong. I think this is a solid-ass project. I think that because of some of those shortcomings I talked about, it sort of lends to pockets of the record sort of getting lost in itself. Even though it's only like 33 minutes and some change, some of those changes can make some big differences when it comes to like revisits of the album. Because I think the beat selection is really solid. I think that Juan definitely knows how to write. His pen game is definitely strong. It just needs a little more. A little more to set it over the edge, you know what I mean?
This is for them hating ass bitches, get them bitches in the back. Bitch, I got bops, yeah.
That theme I teased in the intro of a handful of reviews falling under an umbrella is the theme of women in hip-hop, because this December, inadvertently at first, but then I kind of tried to make an effort to do so, by the month's end. I caught up on a handful of releases in rap where women were making splashes left and right. And Coi Leray fits in there in the way that she got some interesting cosigns and had a song that I thought was alright in Players. With that in mind, I still didn't go into this record with the highest of expectations. And on the other side, I landed with this very much in the pool of negativity when it came to my feelings. While I don't mind a good sample flip, and I don't mind some of the choices of samples, in fact, I think some of them, when done well, land pretty strongly, but like Daryl Hall and John Oates' Rich Girl in the opener is not a good use of that. Pump Up the Jam on the David Guetta cut is almost clumsy in delivery. It feels like Coi is fighting the meter with how she's doing the hook. And I just don't think the bars that she's laying out amidst this enhance some of that lazy sample usage. My Body is the most obvious use of that sample you could even think to do. This record feels devoid of a lot of creativity, and the moments where it does have an idea, it's more or less drowned out with like 5 negative ones on top of that. Hell, to jump it back to Busta Rhymes, he uses techno-logic better than Coi Leray does on this project with Fuck It. Plus the moments that aren't filled with overt lazy sample usage or just really baffling sample usage are the most plastic sounding, sterile, bland pop you could imagine. This is the kind of embodiment of what, when it comes to like taking an idea and stretching it out into its barest minimum to the point that this feels like a sort of one-trick pony type of experience. Coi Leray's Coi is, I think, a really strong exercise in that practice. It's going to be on the worst of the year list. I really don't like this. To wrap this up, because I'll be talking about it in tomorrow's video, I'm giving this a 2 out of 10 because some of the choices I like, but even then, some of the executions of them just aren't it, Chief. I think it's safe at this point to add Noise Rock Duo 68 to a pantheon of bands that I continue to cover on the listening log because they release solid enough albums to entice me to check them out, yet fail to consistently reach the highs that they were at when I first got into them. Yes, and it feels like an exercise in spinning plates, but it doesn't let anything fall in a way that I think is horrible. It just leaves me feeling more neutral than any other album in this lane this year. I always talk about how there's always like the most solid-ass, heavy album to release in a calendar year. Shibalba is the perfect example of like a metal band that releases solid enough albums without much in the vein of growth. They've definitely reached a plateau. But with Yes And, I can see some idiosyncratic sort of idea retreading happen in a way that, had it not been for a density increase in like their guitar and bass, I probably would have written this album off more than I do. Like the opener with Distance Between, it feels like the same sort of stage setting tricks they've played on albums past, but I do like the production changes that give the second half of the track a little more of like this resolving meltdown that I think is an attribute that I would say is some of the album's bigger strengths. And their sort of Had a Tricks feels like it's definitely been played out, or at least shown in full, because you can tell they're trying to throw a sort of curveball with remove their hooks, but again, it retains that sort of edge that doesn't feel like it's doing anything new for this band, which at this point I kind of would have wished they had expanded on, at least where their last album was heading, as opposed to feeling a little more swept up in itself like they do here. I recently said in a chat somewhere on somebody's stream that at the end of the day, when I started doing these listening logs, I've realized that a lot of music is just alright. And I would say the components on Yes and That Work definitely are just alright. Even when they're trying to do something a little bit different, like on the Let's Be Friends End This War sort of duology tracks, sonically they just feel like they're sort of spinning in circles. It just sort of feels like they're making their rounds and checking off a checklist, so to speak, in a way that I think is a lot less interesting than the band is trying to make it sound. Even by the album's end, it feels like I hadn't really gotten much out of this in a way that made me want to keep coming back. You know, it just feels like it's an album of directionless idiosyncrasy. It's probably the best 2 words I can give to describe this record. I'm giving it a 5. I thought about giving it a 6 because I really do like some of the production ideas on here. But the lack of interest I had in this album over any of the other records of theirs that I've liked more kind of set this album back for me. You know, I enjoy some of the riff work, sure. Again, I enjoy the production and the tightness within this duo's unit. I think it's still strong. I just kind of want them to branch out more from this point. Norway's own Kvelertak has been a hard rock band that, unlike 68, I actually always am excited to see what they got going on, because I think that their blend of like Norwegian-inspired metal with a sludgier, twangier twist is a cocktail that I still think breeds some interesting results. And Endling, I feel like, takes where I feel like they were swept up in a little more of a monotony on Spilled, throws themselves back into the dirges, so to speak, with a project that I think retains some of those more straightforward rock ideals on there, but brings it back into a realm also Kvelertak. I think that this record, by and large, is an improvement, and I think that as far as like creating some great riff-filled ragers, Endling has some great showcasings of that. You know, the bass med Motsols has this readaptation of like 70s rock into a modern scope that I think sticks the landing pretty fucking well. That same energy being felt on the sort of washed out, warped guitars on Skullganger. The way some real intensity and bite crops up on tracks like Lickvolk and the pseudo blast beats that crop up on this track. Or the way they bookend the record with these like 7-minute jams that showcase the band's expansions on songwriting and some pretty fruitful endeavors. I think this record's really fucking strong. I feel like if you're a fan of rock-ass rock music, or you like hard rock from bands from America like Baroness, and you still haven't given Kvelertak your time of day, I think you're sleeping on one of Norway's hidden gems. I think this is another really strong record from these guys. I like it more than their last one, and even if I don't understand quite what they got going on lyrically, I enjoy the vibes all around and always have. I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. It's a really strong fucking record from these guys. A timely December release, at least in the realms of what I decided to dive into throughout December. Nicki Minaj dropped Pink Friday 2 to close out 2023. And just like in true Nicki fashion, I feel like Nicki waters down her own record by following trends in a way that's better than some of the people that have been following the trends that I've already dunked on in this video, while also showcasing her tenacity for writing some pretty decent bars. Ends up creating a project that overstays its welcome by like a decent fucking margin. Honestly, it also just kind of feels like a record that feels cobbled together. I feel like this could have gone a couple more passes in like the sequencing department to create a record that feels a little more like cohesive from a listening perspective, because there's ideas on here that I enjoy, and there's like a through line throughout the project to sort of act like a sort of jack of all experience for Nicki, but it also just kind of feels cobbled together in the same breath. You know, because it's got stuff like tracks that follow the super sample heavy stuff that I dogged like the Coi Leray record on, like on Red Ruby to Sleaze, or on the two big tracks that have dropped from this, Everybody and Super Freaky Girl, one of which I think is a pretty decent use of its sample, and I think that Nicki's wordplay on the consistent sample flip is a lot more clever than what I was dogging on like the Coi Leray record. And the other acts as a sort of another notch in the trends belt of a track that really poorly uses its sample, while also being a point where it feels like Nicki is sort of like copy-pasting a lot of her calling cards in one of the laziest versions of her like sex-driven attitude that I've heard her lay onto record. It's also got those like minimal club-style bangers that I think she still champions pretty well, like on Fuck the Club Up and on Bomb Bomb. I think Fuck the Club Up is honestly one of the better tracks on the record, and I'm glad to see it also garner some attention. I think the R&B style tracks are still not Nicki's strongest suit, but I think that there's some moments of that where she at least creates an interesting sort of either lyrical flip like on R&B with Tate Cobain and Lil Wayne, and creates a good sort of recurrence of a desire for love like on Falling For You. There's components of this that I enjoy. Like I've said with artists like Drake, when you tap into like a scattershot everything with the kitchen sink approach, you're gonna drop some tracks within a track listing that are gonna be pretty solid, especially given Nicki's been doing this for long enough. She knows what her strengths are as a writer. I just feel like this could have done with a lot to sort of trim the fat, lean it up, and make for a better listening experience. I also think a handful of the features don't do much to add to the equation. While I like the sort of flip on R&B, I think Wayne's contribution, and Tate Cobain's especially, aren't nearly as strong as, say, like J. Cole's on the track before. Or how I think Skilly Bang and Skang sort of add to Forward from Trini and create an energy that I think they were trying to capture on Needle with Drake, but I think Drake's patois shtick still just isn't it, Chief. By the time the back half of this record washes through and I'm sort of swept up in tracks like the Future collab and Last Time I Saw You, I'm kind of just ready for the album to be over. When it comes to like, I've already been working on a Nicki Minaj redacted spoilers for something that might happen next year, but I could see Pink Friday being another record that ends up on my redacted table, because I like some of the ideas here, and I think that as far as like reaffirming why Nicki is a decent enough songwriter, this has some good tracks in it. And I'm going to be giving this a 4, if only because it's not ending up on my worst of the year list, but it's one of those that definitely reaches that cusp for how much it overstays its welcome, and the moments where I feel like it really sort of feels like the record is sort of dragging itself through the mud, so to speak.
Judgment is coming, I'm ready to go.
With the shedding of the lingua ignota moniker by Reverend, Kristin, Michael, Hayter, we see her dissect herself from the grandiosity that was explored throughout the records of hers that I've expressed a lot of love of in the vein of like Caligula and Sinner Get Ready, but takes the themes of a record like Sinner Get Ready and grounds them in a realm of reality that I think blurs the lines of like performance and creativity and realism that I absolutely adore the practice of by Kristin. I don't think that this record is necessarily as musically interesting or as sort of sonically interesting as a record like Sinner Get Ready, but the way that it explores faith and a sort of fleeting desperation for faith throughout a lot of this, that with a whiplash sort of lo-fi approach that also cements some of that desperation in a realm of reality, I think is executed so very strongly. You know, I'm not, like I said in my Sinner Get Ready review, I'm not somebody of the church. I wasn't raised in the church. I was raised outside of all of that. I think it's interesting to see artists sort of deconstruct and look at aspects within faith and the practice of it, and the variety of, executions said reflections and deconstructions can sort of produce. I also think that the acoustic-ass, lo-fi, twangy field bits feel the most real as far as, like, capturing a sort of POV within a character piece record like this. They feel like the snapshots within Kristin's journey back of diving back into they feel like the POV snapshots of Kristin working her way back into faith and her reassessment of it. I also think that the blending of that lo-fi with some of the flirtations of grandiosity further put the album in a realm of darkness that I think sort of skirts some of the darkness seen on a record like Caligula, honestly, with the closer being a moment where Kristin sort of attempts the style of chanting that's sort of thrown in at the end of a handful of songs on this, that has this real pain behind it, that has this feeling for hope that is without much else beneath it other than desperation. I think that it is a strong-ass record. I love this record in a way that I think is not quite as intense as the Lingua Ignota stuff, but as a fan of good performance art and good sort of commitment to one's own artistic pieces without going to the sort of vile realms that I have criticized other artists of doing so in the past, I can say that I like this. I'm giving it an 8. It's probably my least favorite thing I've heard from Kristin because I don't necessarily enjoy gospel hymns in this direct of a way. I can appreciate a lot of the musicality and artistic and a lot of the creative endeavors that are done within this in a way like I can other records that sort of fall in a realm that's less serious than observing one's own faith. I don't necessarily endorse the message that Kristin may be writing with in this, but I feel like as far as in service of what she's aiming to creatively express, I think that it does so wonderfully. I'm of two minds with Olivia Rodrigo's Guts, because while I didn't get into Sour when it dropped, Brutal was one of my most streamed songs of the year last year, and I have gotten more into Olivia Rodrigo stuff in a way that made me want to get into Guts by the year's end. It should just happen to also happen in December. While I enjoy the growth that I see with Olivia in songwriting and in sort of a unit, and in the way that she sort of uses her inspiration and adapts it into her own, a la the 90s sort of adaptation-inspired cuts like the opener All-American Bitch, which I like the way that it goes throughout its ideas and sort of acts as a good sort of kaleidoscope intro. I think Bad Idea writes another good sort of bright rock-inspired cut that I also had on my top 50 singles of the year playlist, if you caught that playlist at the end of the singles video yesterday. And Get Him Back is another great vibrant album cut-ass jam with a good chorus that doesn't necessarily hit the rafters the same way that I would say some of the singles on here do. It still has a good catchy melody at its core. It also has moments where I feel like it's trying to retread ideas in a way that feels a little more derivative in a negative sense. You know, Vampire definitely feels like her own sort of trying to recapture what made Driver's License such a big jam, and I didn't like that song when it came out. I don't really like Vampire as much as some of the other songs on here. It's also got other moments throughout the track listing that showcase Olivia's sort of harnessing of energy when telling a story. She really gets you on her side in the best way possible, like on Making the Bed and Love is Embarrassing, respectively. This is a solid-ass record that I could definitely understand why it got a lot of the accolades it did, even if I didn't love all of its ideas quite as much as others. I still think that it's a strong, catchy-ass record that has a good pop sheen behind it to let those catchy ideas hit even stronger. I'm giving this a 7 out of 10. It's got some moments that I think could have used a little more retooling or just abandonment altogether, but I think that what works on here does work really well, and I can't wait to see where she grows from here.
It's a hurricane party, end days every other Wednesday.
I if I was catching up on some of the women in rap that were dropping in 2023, I'd catch up on an artist that I got into on their last album, Dessa, with her even more pop-leaning Bury the Lead. A record that I kind of feel like I can actually see where Dessa's trying to channel sonically. However, I think she's definitely doing it better than the contemporaries that are also trying to tap into this lane, because she still raps on this. She definitely keeps her pen game strong as well, especially on tracks like The Open or Hurricane Party, or how she spits at the idea of being just somebody's housewife on Decoy, while also taking the time throughout a lot of this record to illustrate a love in her life that seems to be the inspiration behind a lot of the positivity that permeates throughout this, because on The Open or Hurricane Party, there's a mission statement that feels felt. It is a party at what feels like the end of the world. But tracks like 12 to 1 and Blush, and even What If I'm Not Ready, see her exploring love, or at least interest in somebody else, in a way that feels deeper, and sort of helps lend to, and sort of helps enhance that pop-leaning tip that she has on here, to the point where I feel like some of her singing on tracks like I Already Like You, and even on Blush, for a track that I would argue is one of the weaker components on here, she vocally feels like she's channeling like a Carly Rae Jepsen in a way that I like, because I love Carly Rae. And if Carly Rae's gonna drop her happier side of her happy sad duology, I like that Dessa feels like she's sort of trying to enhance some of those positive energies coming out of Canada. I like this record a lot. I think that Dessa's a pretty good songwriter. I think she's got a witty pen game, and I think that her creating these more hook-driven tracks and using her sort of singing timbre a little more a la like a Carmen, but does so infinitely better than an artist like that. She both tries to be and sticks to the landing on being clever in a way that I feel like a lot of people in her lane, or at least in this lane, are trying to do, and not quite hitting the same, punching at the same weight that she is. I also think that the Pop Sheen production actually is pretty fucking well pulled together on here. Even if I don't like Blush's sort of lumbering groove, I think that by and large, the more vibrant, synth-driven, and groove throughout some of that enhances a lot of the mood of the record tenfold. I'm giving this record an 8. I think it's really fucking strong. I think that if you like a good catchy-ass record that doesn't overstay its welcome while having some good bars permeating throughout its lyric sheet, Bury the Lead's a good place to go. It's really fucking strong.
My recipe good, get that pussy to drip, with that drip in the hood, good riddance and good dollar.
Prior to August, I couldn't have been more excited for a new no-name record. I think that she is easily one of the most talented rappers in her lane, especially of her era that she came out. I think that her pen game is strong. She speaks on issues that I think are important to speak on, and had done so with a lot of tactfulness in the past. However, with the release of Sundial and my pushing off of listening to it because of the Jay Electronica shit, and more importantly, in my opinion, her reaction and response to the Jay Electronica shit, really let me down. Really disappointed me in a way that I wasn't expecting. I didn't have that on my bingo card for 2022, for 2023. But I still wanted to listen to it to give her the benefit of the doubt across the rest of the record. Because, I mean, it wasn't her verse that had some real dumb bullshit on it. It was Jay Electronica's. And his verse is still really dumb on here. However, I think that this record as a whole is a better reflection of her response. It also feels like her slice of the therapeutic circles that hip-hop has been sort of spinning through, especially in a lot of choice instances where this record feels less like a Mr. Morale and more like a Tyler's Goblin, for how much it's trying to sort of backpedal and hold accountability in a way that I feel like detracts from speaking on the issues at hand. It's important to have transparency as a whole, I think, as a creator. I think that when discussing issues especially, you should have transparency about it. But when you're talking about people selling out in your own self-internal conflict with ending up in a situation where you've had to sell out in a sort of sense, and your reflections on that, and how a lot of where she boils some of those ideologies down to, especially on a track like Namesake, sort of feels like it undercuts some of the more important messages talked about on tracks like Hold Me Down. While I could admire as well the boldness to take that kind of direction as an artist like noname, especially given how prolific some of her beefs with other rappers have been in the interim between records, I just think that the execution is a lot sloppier than I would have imagined from an artist of noname's caliber. I also think that as a whole, while I like the instrumental palette that this album is cooking with, I think that it's less interesting. It's not poorly produced, it's not poorly written in some instances, and I think that, again, especially some of the bars on a track like Hold You Down are really strong and pertinent, you know? Because even outside of that, I really like the penultimate track, Gospel. I think that Billy Wood's cropping up once again in a year where he's been probably his most prolific in what I've seen. Just comes to play with some bars that really match a lot of the sort of imagery and ideology that noname is spinning on that track. While I feel like she tries to sort of bridge her own place within this outside of Namesake as well, like on Toxic and potentially the interlude, I just don't think that the message getting lost in how broad this album tries to paint its brushstrokes, as it were. The sort of juxtaposition of self-evaluation with world evaluation muddies the message a lot in a way that I think is just kind of detractory. I'm giving this a 7, because outside of Jay Electronica's verse, I think a lot of what noname is doing is interesting, and her pen game is still really strong. It's just a clumsy as fuck version of a record that I think could have been a lot better had it picked a realm to really heavily deconstruct without drifting too far in any sort of lane that it tries to dip into.
He plays suck a little dick in the bathroom. Who that man with the big strong hands on her ass in the club with the past beat that.
Speaking of women rappers that got themselves steeped in controversy, Doja Cat's Scarlet sees her trying to create a rapper that spits in the face of her label and anybody who tried to just label her as a pop artist, while also crafting some of her catchiest jams to date, which I don't mind that sort of attitude behind a pop record. I just wish that, like, the songwriting were better in the case of, like, writing verses that were more consistently strong when it came to writing a rapper's ass rapper album, you know, and the same arguments I had for a record like For All the Dogs by Drake. Some of the songs I don't like some of the songs I like on there aren't saved by Drake. Similarly to Doja Cat, she ruins what I would argue are some of the better attributes of this project. I like the Dionne Warwick sample on Paint the Town Red. It's a track that definitely walks away as one of the better highlights on here, but it's still not a track that I would say was anywhere near my top 50 singles of last year. I think Doja ruins her own beat with Demons. I like the lo-fi edge that track permeates, and I think that as far as like leaning into that, this isn't a pop album style, that's more of what this record I think needed. I just don't think Doja harnessed that energy with anything that I would say was quality. Same with Wet Vagina, honestly. While Wet Vagina could definitely have hit, I think Cupcake could have done more with the beat in that lane than I think Doja does on that track if we're comparing artists that definitely make some raw-ass tracks. And even some of the pop-leaning tracks outside of Paint the Town Red don't quite hit to the same caliber as that track, like Agora Hills. Or on Attention, which I think has one of the better verses, which I think has some of the better verses from Doja, but her hook on that song just isn't it, Chief. I think Doja hits a pretty good groove on 97 and spins some decent bars on there. Even if I think it's weird that these songs are about Jay Cyrus, you can tell she definitely cares for him on Love Life, and I think the production on that track is one of the moments where I think a cleaner production helps some of the songwriting Doja has going on. And even if I think it's a weird-ass outro for this, What You Mean Freestyle is kind of hilarious. It just doesn't feel like an outro for this project. I guess for a project that has this mission statement, sure, but with how this record I think poorly lands as a fuck the pop tip record, I just think that it makes some of those choices creatively flop even harder. I'm giving this a 4. I don't know if I'm going to be really following Doja Cat post this, because the tracks on here that I thought were alright aren't saved throughout the rest of the record, and I think that Doja being on her bullshit is just something that I don't give a shit about anymore. Similarly to some of the other records I've talked about, this is going to end up on my worst of the year list. You'll just have to find out where tomorrow. I'm amazed it took me this long to listen to Playing Robots into Heaven because I've liked James Blake's discography by and large. Every time I talk about him on the listening log, I've got nothing but glowing praise for the most part to say. I think that this further excursion back into the worlds of electronics has yielded some cool things from James Blake, and I think that Playing Robots into Heaven is absolutely another record in that same breath. I feel like he's crafting some really cool ideas to sort of look back on love and sort of bask in one's own sorrow and misery in a pretty fruitful way. There's a feeling of being sort of overly contemplative that permeates throughout some of the earlier parts of the record, like Unloading, that see one trying to process the sort of tragedy that they have been thrust into, that I think creates this very isolated but kinetic and well-crafted atmosphere. I think the swell and washing of synths throughout Fall Back sort of carries that energy pretty amicably as well. I Want You to Know might be the best use of the vocal sampling and chipmunking that happens throughout the project. I think that is an apex of the project and probably the strongest piece of this emotional picture. I think acts as this good sort of emotional resolve throughout the back half of the record. There's a good consistency throughout this that I enjoyed. There are some missteps, in my opinion. I feel like the Big Hammer and its follow-up, the track Big Hammer itself, is one of the stronger moments on the project. I think that its sort of minimal, wonky synth play just isn't as compelling to me. I also think that If You Can Hear Me sort of dissolves the record away into its title track in a way that I don't think is all that interesting. But as a whole, I think that this record is really solid, and I think continues to showcase that James Blake's sort of rekindling with electronics has been an interesting place for his discography to go, but I'm happy to see him churn out some really cool jams in the process. I'm giving this a 7. I think that if you like electronic music and 2023 had a bevy of really good electronic releases, Playing Robots into Heaven should be on your rotation because it's got some pretty strong tracks on there that made me wish I had invested in it earlier in the year.
Man, I got to a demon that we can agree on. Pledge your allegiance, or better not involve.
When I talked about a record like Tech Nine's Asinine bringing theme park rap into its own sort of realms to the nth degree, I thought that Tech would have been like the worst committer of that kind of sonic through line. Yet Busta Rhymes on Blockbusta decided to prove me wrong. I like Busta Rhymes a decent amount. I made a playlist earlier this year with tracks between him and Q-Tip that had a lot of rotations throughout the back half of the year. And while I didn't have the highest of hopes, given I saw he was working with dudes like DaBaby and Chris Brown still, and also further giving Coi Leray a slice of the industry by giving her a feature on here on a track that definitely feels in line with where like Coi Leray is sitting in the realms of hip-hop. And also, similarly to Nicki Minaj's Pink Friday, goes further into delving into some of those trends by like flipping a Wanna Be Startin' Something sample flip on the return of Mansa Musa, while also tapping into that big, amped, theme park style energy, but in like a lesser degree on tracks like Remind 'Em with Quavo, which Quavo's fine on that track, but I think Busta isn't coming to play with a decent flow or bars at all. The chorus, the choral pads add to that intensity, but Busta just doesn't. Same with on Big Everything. While DaBaby, obviously, I don't think has bars, and Busta's more laid-back flow doesn't add to some of the energy of that track. I also think the same could be said for OK, where Young Thug feels like he's trying to match those horns that aren't produced in a way to give them power, but feels like they're trying to command the listener's presence. Or on Stand Up, which has a Gangsta's Paradise sample flipped into a drill-style beat that I think is actually kind of hard. I don't think Busta matches that intensity with anything that I think is enthralling. Sure, J&R Choi matches that drill style. I don't think Busta really does, and it feels like an instance where a lot of this record has moments where Busta's trying to, like, fit a lane, similarly to Nicki, but just floundering it in all the ways that she doesn't, outside of a handful of instances. I wish there was more, like, hold up and slide, where Busta has to, I feel like, come to the table with some energy, but it feels like he's coasting through a handful of this project in a way that's just really disappointing, given I think Busta, as a vet in the game, at least had some promise and has shown some promise in the past. Blockbusta's not the instance of a record like that. This is getting a 3. It's going to be on my worst of the year list somewhere, but it's not a record that I would say I walk away from wholly loving by and large.
You break me, then I break my rules. Last time was the last time too.
Part of me almost skipped this post-record Austin because I've had diminishing returns on Posty's catalog by and large. Every time I've revisited, I've given in a record of his a lower score than the one prior. My biggest issue doesn't crop up on this album, Austin. In fact, I think this might be his most sonically consistent record to date, and I think that his focus on this lyrical through line that feels like he's partaking in the saddest, loneliest pub crawl that's ever been witnessed, he basks in that misery in a way. He basks and looks at some of the sadness amidst his own attempt at a party in a way that I feel like is a lot more earnest and lets both the bops and the acoustic interludes weave together harmoniously. My biggest issue with this record is it could have used a whole nother pass in the mixing bay, because a lot of the production on here, I think, neuters, especially some of the pop-leaning stuff that he's crafting on here. A track like Too Cool to Die feels like it should be sweeping the listener up in this euphoric bliss, but it feels more muddied in the bass in a way that I don't think is quite as enlightening, or at least as, like, warming and speedometer for as funky as it is, and for as much as I like the bass production on it, I feel like it kind of washes out some of the other components of the track that I think could have made it a stronger single in its own regard. I don't know, as far as my problems with Post, the pop star, have been over the last couple of releases, this actually feels like him trying to pull something together that's a little more easy to sit through, and creates a record that I think has a much better through line, but he needed some improvements elsewhere. It's interesting. He's either delivering one or the other, it feels like. However, unlike his last record, I'd actually like to see him sort of fine-tune this and work around this scope in a way that can evolve into what I would say could be a better record on the other side. I thought that this was alright. While I feel like it risks getting swept up in itself, given it sort of basks in this sorrow, I think that he does a decent job at sort of pacing and tone-wise and song style-wise, keeping the listener invested on the through line in a way that wasn't there on 12 Karat Toothache. I'm giving this a 5. It's very fine. It's very alright. It's the most okay a Post record has been in a minute for me, and I hope that he sort of continues down improving on this, like I said, but at the end of the day, I liked this more than his last, but not by a whole lot. While I'm not unfamiliar with Metric's brand of, like, indie-inspired dance music, I've never really done a full excursion on a record of theirs, full stop. And while Formentera 2 may not be the best jumping-on point for a full album excursion, it does flesh out seeds that I had, assumed they would have dove into, while having some fun pivots that feel like they're branching off of something else, given this is a sequel to a record that I knew got some decent praise when it came out, and has me even more curious at the other side of this record's closing. The bass-driven groove that opens this thing up, I think, presents a good sort of jam to get the listener invested without necessarily blowing their fucking minds. But I think it carries itself into a good initial stretch, especially well given the groove is carried on the well-written Just the Once that I think has this good sort of fleeting romantic side to its lyrics that, again, are more in line with what I would expect from this band, given what bits of their sound I am familiar with. I do enjoy the electronic groove that crops up on Stone Window, and while I kind of wish it was more of a focal point of Descendants, I like Descendants, and I think that it's an interesting sort of late album sort of crescendo that the album, I think, builds to in a pretty decent way. I wasn't expecting the more acoustic-leaning cuts, like Nothing Is Perfect and Who Would You Be For Me, but I think they round out some of the emotional sincerity in a more intimate realm that the album sort of feels like it's permeating with, that I think also just creates some cool moments unto themselves. I love the airy sort of side throughout Would You Be For Me, and I think creates this good sort of middle piece for the listener to sort of stew in the ambience. This is a solid-ass album. I think that it doesn't necessarily stray too far from where I may have expected the band to dive into, given what small glimpses into their catalog I have seen. But I think that this is a solid record that I think that, like, it's got some good ideas throughout it and some nice songwriting thematics that I think carry themselves out consistently throughout the track listing well enough. I'm giving this a 7. It's really fucking solid. I love that this band has this sort of unity. They have this tightness amidst its sort of airy deviations from the more kinetic ideas that I had thought would have been more of a through line on this. But I like this. This is good. Very solid. I don't think if I had listened to it earlier in the year, it would have wowed me or grown on me in any sort of way. But it's at least a decent record that has some fun flirtations with ideas.
I'm looking good when I'm hopping out that truck. Where the hood niggas that they get them.
I knew if I was doing a deep dive on catching up with women in rap this year, I had to listen to Hood's Hottest Princess, because this record, especially by year's end, caught a lot of attention. Anthony gave it an 8. Spinning this in tandem with all the other records I spun this month and last month made me wish Cupcake were still dropping records, because this record sits in the same lane as like Denzel Curry's Zoo, or like a lot of stuff coming out of like the South when it comes to just personality-driven, non-super sample-filled or melody-driven rap music that knows what it is and just delivers on it, full stop. Sexyy Red absolutely owns all of the confidence she brings to the microphone. And the beats have some bangers beneath them. I mean, Tay Keith pulls together some just bass rattling thumpers that I think really help enhance the attitude that Sexyy Red's spitting with on here. It's also nice to see Nicki come together out of all the records I spun on here, and I think she delivers some really good stuff. You know, the fact that she tabbed Juicy J on here. She's got a track called Nachos, where she spins the punchline, "I'm Nacho Bitch," in the chorus. She calls herself the female Gucci Mane to close this out. She absolutely knows what she wants to bring to the table, and I think she does so. Because I'm giving this a 7. It is very much a 2000s ass rap album. I wish more rappers made these kind of like banger fests that don't necessarily have to lie on trends or try to carve out something that feels modern. It just sort of brings something from the past to the current in a modern way. I mean, the fact that ski has kind of become just like a more popularized phrase throughout the zeitgeist alone sort of cements the appeal of something like this. And I think that it's there, but I think it does need a little something else to set it just a little bit over the edge. I don't like all the beats on here, but I think a lot of them are quality. And I think that they all sort of are to service Sexy's hilarious, if not very blunt and forward bar spinning. So I just straight up didn't film a review for Isn't It Now, and I feel bad because I did give time to this record, and I do like Co, and I think that this record is solid. It's funny, when I started to spin this, I got the inkling to like revisit Time Skiffs, because I'll be honest, I don't keep Co in my rotation regularly. I did a lot back in like 2013, 2012, and I still look upon like their classics fondly. And I would like to sort of actually evaluate their catalog at some point, because they do have a lot of interesting peaks and valleys. And I've kept consistent on covering them on the listening log, and I wanted to keep with it with this record, because even if I think that it's paced what feels like a little bit wonkier than Time Skiffs, and I think that like some of the
the deeper sonic concepts just don't come together for me. It's still, like, got a lot going on that I think is really good. I do enjoy some of the like, more straightforward Beach Boys worship that, you know, is a part of their calling card, but, like, feels so different juxtaposed with some of the other stuff on here. Like, I think that Soul Capture is a really cool opening, and I like the sort of way that track evolves, but the more laid back, almost lounge style jams of Genie's Open and Gemini are just some sublime shit, my guys. I think that they sound just incredibly tight on those jams. I think that their vocal work just sounds incredible, and I think that they're catchy ass tunes on top of that. I also think that it does, like, vocal layering stuff in a way that's far less nightmarish and sticks to the landing better than on Painting With, in a way that I just absolutely adore, because I think that, like, it's an attribute of theirs that can work incredibly well. And I think that the minimalism on King's Walk, and, like, the way that they just cast the album out with this super mellow sunset, it sort of feels like, is pretty fucking choice. I think that Defeat really splits the record in a way that I just wish wasn't the case. Defeat's a fine song, but I feel like it goes on for just a bit too long. You get a reward at the end with Gemini, but man, the road to that path is I did hit skip on that more often than not, I'm not gonna lie. But I do like a lot of the ideas here, and I think that it's a solid record, if not a little wonky in construction. I'm still giving it a 7, because I think that the songs are really choice. This would be an interesting Redacted to do at some point, but the record does kind of have, like, this feel to it that I think would be interesting to disrupt, but I don't know if it would make for a more fruitful experience. Either way, now let's go on to the last album I listened to in 2023.
I can choose when to take a stand.
I decided to close this year out how I opened it, by looking at a 90s band that decided to come back for another round. That also was a thread that cropped up a couple other times in the year. In the eyes of Semisonic's Little Bit of Sun, their comeback album that sees them following suit of, like, an Everything But the Girl, and coming back and bringing us where they left us in A Matter of Speakings. There's a sense of sort of catching up that falls throughout the lyrics on here, and there's a sense of optimism to this that I think sort of permeated aspects of, like, the songs of theirs that I do know. I think that what weighs this record down is more the direction the band took their sound. It has this softness to it that feels tangential to where, like, they were with tracks like Closing Time, but it's got this rounded out adult contemporary edge that I think bogs it down into a realm of mediocrity. I think the songwriting is still as sharp. I mean, their frontman being a bona fide hit maker from a songwriting perspective does get to showcase on parts of this in the sort of turns of phrase that he spins into some of these hooks. The points where they even do try to, like, kick it in with an electric edge, like on Grow Your Own, have this sort of tepidness that feel like very much 40s dad rock in a way that's, like, fine, but not anything that, again, I would write home about in any sort of fruitful way. Like, I enjoy the reflections on tracks like It Wasn't Like We'd Hoped It'd Be, that Only Empathy does a good job at embodying that sort of secondhand grief or sorrow one can feel for somebody else. It's got this personal, intimate touch in its lyrics that I think sticks the landing, and it's a moment where that more reserved sonic composition is suited or helps enhance the lyrics at hand. But as a whole, this just feels like the most sort of safe, simple sort of type of record that doesn't feel too far off from, like, what I talked about with Belle and Sebastian to open up the year and sort of bring it full circle in a sense. But where that record sort of had more moments where it felt like they were sort of pushing their own older ideas and their older headspace into their own proverbial sound, this feels like they're adapting into a more tepid idea that I just don't think brings me with much that I'll be revisiting in 2024. I'm going to give this a 6.
It's fine. It's nothing offensive. It's just nothing super mind-blowing either. And that was how I sent out 2023. Were there some albums I still didn't cover that you liked from last year? Let me know those in the comments down below. If you did like this video, give it a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. While it is a more dense week posting-wise this week, I normally drop 2 to 4 vids, depending on what I've got going on. List week continues with my worst and best albums dropping in that order, respectively. Thank you so very much for continuing to watch what I got going on. I'm gonna go. Thank you again so very much for watching. I've been Viral Rack. You guys are good days, lives, and situations. And I'll see you another day.